Hello, everyone. How's it going today? I will get started just in the spirit of starting things on time. Um, this is going to be a slightly casual presentation. I've got a lot of great slides prepared and ready to kind of talk to you about what's going on with cultural awareness and how it can help you propel growth in your larger organization. I'm very active in the chat, so I know happens kind of a weird platform where we don't get to see each other necessarily. So as we're going through this, I'd love your feedback. If you want to have conversation or ask questions, you can certainly throw that in the chat. So without further ado, we'll get started. My name again is Michael Abata. If I didn't say that before, I've actually thinking about this topic for quite some time. I spent 16 plus years at large organizations, infusing cultural awareness into all sorts of things from brand marketing to product design. And I recently made the switch to the startup life. I'm now at the retailer startup camp out of New York City. I've been there for about 4 months. I'm into the startup world and realizing that this sort of topic is still very much important and can lead to a lot of awesome success. I just out of curiosity, I'm going to throw a quick poll in. I like to be interactive in my presentation, so I'm going to throw a quick poll in the chat just to see where everyone is from. So I think that if you go up to in the chat section, in the poll section, you can, if you have a chance, you can kind of vote from kind of where you're from, if you're a founder, an entrepreneur, or if you're sitting in a large brand. Awesome. So let's get started. When we talk about cultural awareness and being culturally aware, many folks tell me it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time. People feel like there are too many things going on in the day to really be able to monitor everything that's going on. And I will tell you, it can be really hard. But I think that as we go through this today, you're going to be really excited with some tools and some frameworks that I'm going to enable you with. But the exciting part about being more culturally aware of what's happening in the world, in your organization, whether that's a big brand or if it's a startup brand, is that it can certainly lead to breakthrough and new ideas. You get higher employee engagement and retention because you are participating in what's most important to them. It can also increase your brand reputation, which all of those things can lead to sales growth and lower customer acquisition costs. And most importantly, it can create a lot of love for your culture. For your company culture. So what does this look like? Just as a broad example, I have a few of them. So Microsoft actually a few years ago started paying attention to what was going on in the disabled community and what was happening in the disabled and accessibility cultural space. They spent a lot of time actually identifying what that looked like and putting it on paper. You'll see that in the persona spectrum that they have outlined here. And what that led to was them creating a lot of new products. The Xbox adaptive controller is one of their first products that they launched, which gained a ton of attention across the marketplace and really accelerated Microsoft to participating and being a part of the disabled community and being much more aware of the disabled culture that was in the conversations that were happening. It's led to some really breakthrough technologies, and they've also inspired a lot of other tech companies to get involved with that. On a very different spectrum, Costco is a company all focused on cosplayers. So the cosplaying and Comic-Con world is a huge world that's been largely ignored by most companies and brands. And they realized that there was money to be had in that space. And there was a lot of unmet needs going on in that world. And so they tapped into that $4.6 billion marketplace, which is expected to grow to, I think, about 20 billion by 2030. And they've created a world based on a specific subset of culture, of interest in niches, which is really exciting. Zaya Care is a completely different example of this, really focused on women and post-maternal care. Their founder realized that women were largely being ignored after birth. And the maternal mortality rate in the US is one of the highest in developed countries. And so they started developing resources and ways to enable women to get the care they needed that was largely being ignored by insurance companies, which is funny because now they're partnering with insurance companies to supplement a lot of their offerings. But again, it's another subset of culture that had been being ignored or not being thought about by broad businesses, which led to this really cool example here today. I talk a lot about when I talk about culture and what's going on in culture, and how it impacts a brand. It's really important to sort of ground ourselves that a brand's reputation is no longer just about how you communicate or what you put on paper as your company mission. It's really created through consumers' opinions of how you behave, how you present yourself, and how you engage with culture. Um, Many people will say, and I've seen this in my 16 years of experience, that what people think about a brand and how they believe in a brand is based on its actions. And that's sort of why we're going to talk about uh, culture today. So sort of for our agenda, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a very broad level idea of what cultural conversations are sort of going on. This is going to be very quick. Normally, I could spend hours and days of deep diving into each piece of culture, but for the time frame, for today's time frame, we're just going to talk a little bit about sort of how we frame up different pieces of culture and think about it. Then we're going to talk about the difference between fluid and fixed conversations and how those frameworks can really help you as a founder or entrepreneur, or as part of the larger, uh, if you're part of a larger organization, think about how you apply culture to your everyday work. And then as could be personal, and this could be for your larger organization, but how I'm going to provide you with some tools that will help you grow your diversity of thought and cultural perspective. I'll definitely have time at the end for questions and answers, but like I said before, I'm happy to take questions throughout this presentation, and so you can drop those questions in the chat. Awesome. So let's start talking about culture. What is culture? I like to define it as a summary of attitudes, customs, and beliefs. And, a lot of times when I talk to people about culture, sometimes what I hear is people are thinking about culture from a pop culture standpoint. So they're thinking about like the coolness of culture, things that you see maybe on TikTok, or, like the cool kids are in culture, and that is certainly part of culture, but culture is also who we are and who we identify as individuals. It's about our backgrounds and how we grew up. It's about our beliefs and our customs that we have. And so what's important to understand about culture is all of these things are sort of intersecting at all times and impacting what's important to people, and that's what we want to talk about today and how we start to grow awareness in it. So the first section of culture I like to call attitudes and interests. And for me, I've mainly been in the retail and consumer brand space, but these are sort of the buckets that right now that I'm clumping culture in. This changes on a pretty regular basis, but it starts to help you understand and get in my brain of how I sort of look and observe things in the world. So the first subsegment of that is sort of the music, movies, and television space. There's a few examples in here of certain things right now that are impacting or have recently impacted culture. If you weren't aware that the Minions had a new movie this summer, you certainly saw in every piece of advertising, they were doing some really interesting things in that space. On the opposite end, in this little clump, Charlie Pluth is doing some really crazy stuff in TikTok related to music, and he's actually bringing his audience along in the music creation process. And it's leading to some really new ways in how artists are engaging with their fans. There's the fashion and beauty space, the technology space. The example here is the Gizmo watch. If any of you have kids, this thing is like the new piece of technology that you give your kids before they get a real phone. I had a friend the other day who got it for their little boy who's 7 years old. He's already made 80 phone calls on it in the past 3 days. So it's crazy to think about how new technology is impacting even our youngest generation. Of course, what's happening in the news and interest in that is always something that I'm thinking about and being aware of. I would say nostalgia and fandom is a really big piece of culture right now. Nostalgia has always sort of been in our cultural awareness mindset, but it's certainly coming back in a big way. And I think part of that is because of the craziness that's going on in the world, people are looking backwards to say, there was a time where things felt stable, and these things bring me good memories of that time. There's travel, fitness, food, and festivals. I kind of clump those things together. And then the last two subsegments of attitudes and interests are fairly new for me, but they've been blowing up so much that they're certainly worth a lot of observation. So clearly the metaverse is one of them. We're talking a lot about that here at Twin City Startup Week this week. If you haven't checked out some of those sessions, I highly encourage you to do that. Amir actually from RAM5, his tweet the other day just blew up about this new mapping system that exists in the iOS 16 space that can actually, you just scan your room and it creates an augmented reality space for you, which is pretty crazy. And then of course, TikTok and creators are every single day impacting what's going on in culture. If you haven't heard the It's Corn song, you probably have. I think it's already made it to the radio and it made it to Instagram from TikTok. But again, it just shows you how these platforms are infusing and creating culture. From that, so you have that part of culture, and then the other part of culture that I'm always thinking about, I kind of clump as identity, beliefs, and customs. So there are a ton of different ways that you can approach and dissect that larger subset. Everything from race and thinking style, the sexual orientation, your heritage, the languages you speak, your possibly like your disabilities or your abilities, where you live. All these things sort of are impacting culture. And as we dig into that, I wanted to just dissect a few of those areas and how I'm thinking about that, just to give you a frame of reference. So from a race standpoint, I'm always looking at and observing things that are going on in the Black community, Asian, Islamic, and Hispanic and Indigenous communities. I think that, specifically, like if we think about the Asian community, there's actually been a ton of conversation about just the generalization of how brands treat the Asian community and how that, if you're Chinese versus Taiwanese versus Indian, there's very different cultural nuances that you need to be aware of. And so, there's a lot of ways to sort of dissect each one of those identities and beliefs and customs and go deeper into that. Similarly, we see that with the female community and the disability and accessibility community. I would say the disability and accessibility community has been one of the biggest cultural shifts that I've seen in the last maybe I would say year, with more and more organizations starting to think about this space that's been largely ignored. My friend Kelsey, who is a disability advocate, talks a lot about how 90% of D&I, diversity and inclusion policies or marketing out there actually doesn't include anything related to the disability and accessibility communities, which is pretty crazy. And then, we're hearing a lot about minimum wage workers right now, and how you see this happening with unionization, with Starbucks and at Trader Joe's, and really the conversation necessarily isn't about unions. Even with nurses, right? It's really about fair scheduling and benefit access and paid leave and health and well-being. And so, again, these are just ways to think about and dissect different pieces of culture. And typically I spend hours diving into each one of these subsegments and really highlighting what's going on in each piece. But unfortunately today we don't have time for that, but kind of gives you a good glimpse of how I think about culture. Awesome. So now that we've talked a little bit about culture as a sum of attitudes and beliefs and customs, how do you stay updated with all of this? Really, the way I like to think about it and the frameworks I like to use are two different frameworks. So there's one around fixed conversations and one around fluid conversations. And we're going to dive deeper into these in a moment. But from a fixed conversation standpoint, you can think about these things that are happening in culture that we can sort of predict. They're annualized or they're ritualized experiences that happen on a pretty regular basis. Here in the visually, I have an example of Alaya going back to school. So we're all sort of living, or we just recently lived, that back to school tradition that happens every year. People who study culture will tell you that even if you're not going back to school anymore or you don't have kids, you're still living the anxiety of back to school because of everything that's happening around you within culture. This also represents fixed conversations also represents broader attitudinal shifts that we see with consumer mindset. So these might be things that this is how consumers were thinking now, and then this is how they're going to be thinking for the next maybe 2 or 3 years. And those things can be often, both of these types of things in fixed conversations can often be planned for. You can anticipate that they're going to happen, and you can anticipate how you might participate or be a part of those conversations. Versus fluid conversations on the other side of the spectrum, these are things that are happening in real time that you have to monitor. We can't expect, we don't know that Lizzo's going to have the new song of the summer, It's About Damn Time. And really, that all happened because of this one TikTok person doing a video and Lizzo responding to it. Or collective experiences that happen quite often on TikTok right now, but a new filter gets debuted of a woman running through a palace, and now all of a sudden every brand and every other person is participating in that conversation, and it's sort of this collective thing that's going on. And so we're going to dig deeper into some frameworks that I use that can be really beneficial in your organizations to have these conversations and be aware of these conversations. All right, so the first, we talked about fixed conversation. This is my first framework of a few frameworks that I have. This is a framework that I've used at a few organizations that I've been at. But this is really thinking about and charting out by month or sort of by time frame how consumers are thinking. So if we take January, for example, we know every year that at the beginning of January, most people are going to be thinking about getting a fresh start. They're going to be thinking about getting back to normal from all of the things going on in the holiday. This is why we see every fitness club in the world advertising during that time, because people might have New Year's resolutions. We see a lot of things about organization and home organization, and people's mindset tends to naturally align with sort of everything they're seeing and what they've experienced over time. The same, if we look at right below that, August through September, week 1, this is the moment we just all lived. So it's a lot of finishing up summer, having anxiety as a collective sort of culture, especially here in the US, about going back to school or getting back into a new routine. For a lot of folks, it was actually oh my gosh, my office is now not letting me work from home as much anymore. So I have to figure out this new routine and have to get pants to get back in the office and that kind of thing. But again, these are things that we know happen every year, and we can start to predict those and then share them out with the world. So the next example I have here is sort of how I've done that in the past. And this is something that you as an entrepreneur or a founder or you in your broader organization can actually start to do. So in this chart over here, this was from, I think, 2020. So if you look at this, the dates are a little off, but you can actually start to look at by month what's going on and what's happening from a consumer mindset. So, if we look at February, every year we know that is Black History Month. I can tell you every year it increases more and more from an awareness standpoint. We see more and more brands talking about it and recognizing it and being aware of it and participating in it. We also know that every year in February, the Super Bowl happens. And for a moment in time, everybody is talking about what's going on with those commercials or what's happening at that halftime show. We know Valentine's Day is happening. We know the Golden Globes are going to happen at some time. What I also like to do is infuse when certain movies might be coming out or new shows. from a streaming network standpoint that I think are going to be cultural conversations, such as, I think I had on here. I don't see it on here, but I had when Stranger Things season 3 debuted, because we knew that that thing was going to take off and people were going to be talking about it for some time frame. So as you create this, you spend a little bit of time creating this for your organization, and creating and predicting all the moments that you could maybe participate in or that are important to your brand. And then you can share this tool out with all of your folks. And so when I had this tool at Target, I was so surprised. I developed it for the marketing team, but what I found was everybody in the organization was using this tool. So I had our product development team thinking about it. What are we going to highlight on the website? Can we make a nod at some of these things in our app, or as we do SMS text messaging? Maybe there's something here that we can nod to that would be relevant to people in this time. We had product design teams thinking about it as they were developing new product. They were thinking about, hey, when is this going to hit the shelves? What are people going to be thinking about at that time? Can we design into those of what's happening in culture? So you can, again, see how anticipating some of these fixed conversations can just help you create more relevant, whatever it is, brands, product, messaging to consumers. And then on this other side here, this is just an example of, as I was talking about, sort of broad consumer attitudinal shifts. This is like sort of a framework that I like to use, the from to framework, based on what I'm reading in the world. And so in the third segment of this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about some of the resources to gather all this information from. But there are a lot of companies out there like a Deloitte, EY, Pew Research, who are predicting what's going on with consumers. And they're talking about, hey, the pandemic is done, but now we're hitting a recession and consumers are tightening their belt. I think there was just an article this morning in the Star Tribune about that very specific thing, and how for holidays, consumers are going to be spending less money. They spent a lot of money last year because they were sort of pent up demand. And now this year they're feeling the impact of inflation and higher prices. And so they're going to be spending less. And so you can start to articulate those consumer attitudinal shifts in your organization and share those more broadly with folks. So it's top of mind when they're planning and thinking about whatever piece of the organization they participate in. This again was from 2017, but it actually, when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, you could actually take some of these things and apply it to what's going on in 2022. So idea of people maybe not going to Starbucks as much anymore and actually just using their Keurig or their Nespresso machine. Maybe people, instead of doing a cross-country trip, they kind of got that out of their system over the last year post-pandemic. They're going to continue to do more little explorations around the state. And you can start to think about how those things open up opportunities for the businesses that you run or that you support. On the other side of the spectrum are fluid conversations. These are things in culture that we can't predict. Although there might be some people out there that are looking at culture all the time and probably can predict some of these things, but the average person in the world probably is not going to anticipate that there's going to be a little boy talking about porn and everyone in the world is going to be talking about porn for 3 weeks. Because we all needed a little escape. So this is just a really nice example of places that you can go to actually look at what fluid conversations are going on. I use Google Trends a lot. Google Trends actually has a screensaver that you can set up on your computer, and it will show you what's trending from a search standpoint right now. And you can customize it to the US or whatever location you're in. You can customize it by demographic, but it's a nice way to look at what's sort of happening in the world. It's also, if you're thinking about participating in a specific type of culture or something that's happening in the world, you can actually use Google Trends to look at who's talking about it and how they're talking about it. Exploding topics is a similar mechanism. All of the social media networks actually publish reports every week, every month about what's been trending on their platforms and what they're anticipating. They're all doing that because they want money from advertisers, and so they're trying to enable them with a lot of tools. But for any organization out there, this is a great way to stay up on culture without having to synthesize it yourself, these platforms are doing it for you. And then on the far right here, this trends map, this is a really cool tool that I'll use. I pulled this, I think, just like 2 weeks ago as I was prepping for this conversation. Actually, it must have been a week ago because I think there's stuff about, I see stuff about King Charles in here and about the Queen. So it might have been like right before Queen Elizabeth passed away. But again, this is going to show you what's trending from a hashtag and conversation standpoint across a lot of different social media channels. It's all free. But what's really cool about it is you can explore it from a geo standpoint. So if your business is only maybe in Minnesota or you're targeting certain areas, you can actually look at what people are talking about in conversation and then think about if that's something that you want to participate in. All right. And then finally, from a fluid conversation standpoint, I wanted to share a visual example of how sometimes this comes to life and how I present this out to organizations. So I might take conversations that I'm seeing that are happening in real time in culture, and then I might, typically what I like to do is start to apply visuals to that. I find that you can talk about stuff forever, but actually giving people visuals or really concrete examples of what that looks like is super helpful and inspires people when they're creating new product or they're starting to think about marketing messaging out into the world. Again, these are examples from maybe a few years ago, but quite frankly, I think they're still kind of relevant. So 90s nostalgia is still a thing that's happening in culture, and every day something new is happening in that space. I think these examples here are very dated from when I created this, but certainly like we're seeing 90s culture happen again and again. A lot of things are happening with the boy bands and like Britney Spears right now. We're seeing a ton going on. Actually, Lisa Frank's back in the conversation again. She kind of comes in and out, but she's back again. Trapper Keepers were all over TikTok and actually like the radio this year during the back to school times frame. So you can kind of see like there might be these broader buckets or topics, but the conversations within them are very fluid in what people are talking about and how they're participating in culture. All right. So we talked a little bit about how we think about culture, attitudes, customs, and beliefs. We talked about different ways you can framework culture and share that both for yourself, but share that with your organization. So the last sort of subset of all this is how do you grow your diversity of thought and cultural perspective, both as a founder or an entrepreneur or somebody sits in a larger organization. So we're going to walk through 3 different sort of ways to think about that. How do you grow awareness as a leader or a founder yourself? How do you create a trusted board of advisors that can give you cultural nuances and give you cultural insight to what's important to them? And then how do you engage your employees, the people who work for you? Because I'll tell you, a lot of them are probably even more in tune than you are of what's going on and what's happening, and you can learn a ton from them. All right, so founder and leader awareness. We're going to spend a little bit of time here. These are things that you can do as a leader in an organization or as a founder and entrepreneur, just start to raise more awareness of what's happening in culture. One of the easiest things that you can do that doesn't require a ton of effort is just change who you follow on social media. Oftentimes, who we're looking at on Instagram and on TikTok are people who are like us or who have interests like us. After the murder of George Floyd, there was a lot of conversation in my social circles about, hey, I am not as aware of Black culture as I should be. I need to start following and observing and absorbing more of what's going on in that culture. And so I simply I sat down with my friend Flora and I went through it and changed who I followed on a lot of my platforms. And all of a sudden I was being exposed to a lot of new culture and content that I normally wouldn't have gotten because of the way a lot of the algorithms are written in social media to feed you just what you're personally only interested in. So again, this is a really easy way. So if you want to do a deep dive into pop culture, or you want to be more aware of what's happening in Black culture or the disability community, you start to follow and look for people that are participating in those conversations, and then they'll just show up in your social stream, which is really great, right? And so that's an easy way to sort of infuse that cultural awareness on an everyday standpoint. We could spend hours again talking about who to follow. I probably need to do like a LinkedIn post about that at some point. But if there's a certain piece of culture that you're really interested in, you can certainly, I'll have my email here at the end. Give me a shout and we can hopefully find a few folks for you to follow there. The next kind of step you can do is just really, how are you taking in information? So what types of email newsletters and podcasts are you reading and listening to? I read and listen to about 5 to 10 hours of cultural things a day. That's a lot for any average person. That's just how my brain works. But what I've done is synthesize some of the best that I read for you all today. So from a email newsletter standpoint, the Morning Brew series is actually a pretty good series. Yes, there's some advertising that's kind of built into it because they've got to make some money. But I will tell you, the people running Morning Brew and their subsets of newsletters are often some of the first people to report on what's going on in the world and in culture and in these subsets. I often see what they're reporting get repeated in multiple newsletters later. So they're sort of first to market, if you will. And they do it in a nice, succinct, fun, casual way that makes reading the newsletter a little bit more enjoyable. So even just subscribing to their standard Morning Brew and getting that in your email box every morning before you start work or before you pick up the day is a really great way. There's also, they have emerging tech brew, marketing brew, HR, social, IT. So depending on what area you work in, this is a really great, you can kind of subscribe to one of those subsets. It's funny, our chief people officer, our HR department at camp is one person. So it's not, not a big organization, but she was like, Michael, I'm new to HR. Like she's one of our co-founders. She's like, I'm trying to figure this out. I was like, you need to just subscribe to HR Brew and they'll tell you what's happening in the HR space. And so she subscribed. I think it comes twice a week. And she's like, oh my God, this has been so helpful. Like they're bringing me the news in HR in a really fun and interesting way. I promise I'm not being paid by them. From a news standpoint, Next Draft and what Dave Pell is doing is just really incredible. Every afternoon, he basically summarizes the 6 biggest things going on in the world from a news standpoint. He always adds a little bit of cultural context. You can just simply read those 6 things and you would be really much more informed about what's happening in the world, both in your personal conversations, but then how you're thinking about this for your brand or your founder. And then Rex Woodbury produces a weekly newsletter called Digital Native. He actually blends technology and culture and intersects them and comes up with some really wild ways of thinking about how to be culturally aware, but infused within like the tech space. And it's honestly one of the most fascinating things I've read in a long time. And so definitely recommend his work if you're in that tech space. From a podcasting standpoint, there are a ton of podcasts out there. These are just examples of people to listen to. Nancy is a podcast focused on LGBT pop culture. The Read is focused on Black pop culture and what's going on there. Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. She's focused on talking to leaders about what's happening often through an HR perspective and sort of how people are managing getting through work every day and like what's going on in their brains. So those are good examples, but there are millions and hundreds of podcasts out there. So I just encourage you to search for what type of culture or what you're looking for, look at the reviews and just do a listen or two and see if something sticks for you. Thing Stings is a new, it's not actually that new, but it's a website that is tracking what's going on with direct to consumer brands, DTCs. And I love following that damn website and the newsletter they spit out, because what I get to see is people developing brands on things that are going on in culture. So all of a sudden I might see 3 beauty brands that are using riced cauliflower. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, is riced cauliflower the new matcha? Like, and so for me, it's helpful because I sit in the consumer brand space. It's helpful to see what new DTCs are popping up and what consumer needs and cultural needs that they are sort of appealing to or addressing, because it might identify something for me that I can bring back to either my brand that I'm working for or who I might be consulting with. And then finally, on the far right here, you see These are just a few of many, many examples of just larger organizations that are spitting out free reports. So Pew is a government-funded research agency. They're always looking at what's happening from a consumer standpoint and just what's happening in the US. They spit out reports constantly. And same thing with Mintel. Like I mentioned before, the Deloittes, the EYs of the world, they are always spitting out reports. Part of that is their marketing tactic to get people to come and get more information, but you can get it for free, and it helps you start to be more aware of what's happening in the world. And then Sparks and Honey is a really interesting, they're part of a larger advertising agency, and they do a daily live cast where they talk about culture and all the things that are intersecting with each other that you can listen to. I think it usually happens around 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so 9 a.m. Here in Minnesota. But again, they're a really great organization. If you just want to just hear and like listen to how people are thinking about and talking about culture, especially from a marketing standpoint. And they also produce a fair amount of interesting reports as well. All right, next. So we had those three areas. That was sort of the biggest area about your personal growth as a leader or entrepreneur or founder. Then the second area is around creating a board of advisors. So this might look like internal advisors, so people who are in your organization. Even at camp, we're a startup of about 60 people. So we're growing, we're getting a little bit bigger each day, but we even have like a diversity and inclusion and a cultural awareness little task force that meets on a regular basis and is helping us as a smaller organization think about what's going on in the world and what we want to participate in. There are certainly, when I was at Target, we had literally hundreds of different types of cultural councils and groups that would educate the broader organization. And then a newer thing that I've been seeing in organizations, certainly this was happening at Target and I'm seeing it happen in a lot of organizations, is what's called inclusion councils. So these are in councils that are made up of a broad spectrum of folks who are looking at what a company is going to do in marketing or in their merchandising space or product design. And they're helping the broader organization think about, are you being inclusive of what's going on in culture? Are you aware of what's happening or what you're about to put out in the marketplace? So again, if you're a bigger organization, this could be a tool for you. And then of course, from an internal standpoint, it's just a good reminder, especially if you're at a startup or a smaller organization, are you asking for feedback from your customers and your users? And are you asking for more than just about your actual thing, but are you asking them to give you new ideas or insights or like tell you what's important to them? I think it's really important to ask those questions, and you'd be surprised what you learn and how it can inspire new products, new ideas for your organization. From an external standpoint, most organizations have board of directors. Even if you're a small startup just getting started, you usually have a board of advisors or an advisory board. Often you're talking to them about their expertise in a specific space, but it's always good when you get them together or you have a one-on-one with a director or an advisor to ask them what they're observing in culture, what's happening in their world, or what are they seeing? What should you be aware of? Just asking that question and putting that on your status, you'll be amazed at what you can learn from that and how it might inspire something new for you. Again, we've talked a little bit about there are a ton of social listening tools out there. Bigger organizations certainly use them. And when we were at Target, we were looking at what was happening on a daily basis and talking about it. So those things are out there. There's some free stuff out there, but then there's certainly a lot of paid consultation that can happen in that space. And then finally, I just want to mention from a leader or an executive team development standpoint, there are coaches out there that can actually help you with being more aware of what's happening in specific areas of culture. So Sina Hodges both Sina and Kelsey are local here in the Twin Cities, but Sina, she is the woke coach. She has been helping a lot of leaders at small organizations, at startups, think about the Black community and Black culture, and really helping them through that journey of understanding and then how to participate in those conversations and shift even the company dynamics of being more essentially woke within the Black community. She's an amazing advocate and coach. Similarly, Kelsey Lindahl sits in the disability awareness space. And Kelsey is coaching companies like Disney and Lululemon, but she's here locally, again, helping them create awareness around just the lack of awareness of the disability community, helping people with language, coaching and teaching both individuals and broader organizations. So there are coaches for a lot of these things, and I'm happy to make recommendations if you're looking for something specific. All right, finally, employee engagement. I think this is so important and something that often can get missed in organizations. So when I started at camp, I noticed right away, and we use Slack, and I noticed right away there was nowhere to have conversations about what was happening in culture. And so I quickly created a group that was just like trends in culture, and I started posting things into it, and a bunch of people joined and started posting as well. And so all of a sudden, the organization was being infused with new things happening in culture, which I thought was really exciting. And it started creating this energy and awareness. Similarly, as I mentioned earlier, TikTok is driving culture, right? And so what we wanted to do at camp is actually think about how do we participate in that culture on TikTok, but how do we learn from it as well? And so we created this program called TikTok on the Clock. We actually invite our store employees, we call them counselors, to create TikToks while they're working, as long as they're helping families, but while they're working and posting it on their site or on their TikTok channel. And then we pick a winner each week, whoever gets the most views, and they get $150 cash for doing that activity. And they can participate once a month. So you can earn a lot of money over the course of the year. It's helped us grow our TikTok from 0 to 80,000 viewers in less than 6 months, or followers, which is exciting. But what we do is we show those TikToks at our all company meetings each week for like 5 minutes. And secretly what we're doing is we're infusing culture into the organization by showing people what's trending, what's happening, and how our brand is actually participating in that. So it's a kind of a fun way to engage your employees, but also a way to actually get culture infused back in your organization. All right, so we talked a little bit about culture and what it is, some of attitudes, beliefs, and customs, and the different areas that you can think about culture. We talked about fixed and fluid conversations. Fixed conversations being those conversations that you can plan for, and you can start to create frameworks within your organization to anticipate those. And then fluid conversations and the tools that you might be able to use to sort of track or think about what's happening in the world right now. And then finally, we talked about ways that you can engage in culture, be more aware of what's going on, and the tools and resources that you can use as a founder, how you can create that trusted, board of advisors, I like to call it, for yourself, and then how you can engage your employees. And I'm hoping that with all of this, you too can be more culturally aware, both as a founder and a leader or in an organization, but also as a broader organization so that you can participate in these conversations. And I will guarantee you, well, who says that? I will guarantee you, I can't remember, but I will guarantee you that when you start participating and you're just more aware, you're going to create way better, exciting things in the world. Your customers are going to be more excited about it. You're going to find new product opportunities or new business opportunities that are going to lead to sales growth. Your acquisition costs are going to be lower because all of a sudden the emails that you're spinning out or the social media that you're posting is actually more relevant to what people are thinking and doing and saying in that time frame. So cultural awareness is easy. It can be easier. You too can be aware and participate in it. So that's my shtick. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today. It's really hard. This Happening platform is a little hard because I can't see anybody's faces, so I don't know what people think or if this was helpful or not. But if you have any questions or if you'd like to go, actually, I can't remember the link, but I can actually give you access and you can speak to me. But if you have any questions or thoughts, if you want to throw those into the chat, that would be awesome. Thank you, Natasha. I appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Well, I know time is always of the essence, so we'll give you a little bit time, some time back. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Twin Cities Startup Week experience. I sit on the advisory board, and I've been participating in Twin Cities Startup Week for many years, and I'm so excited to have you all here. So, again, if you have any questions or anything else, oh, thank you, Melinda. I'm happy to answer those questions. You can shoot me an email, find me on LinkedIn, and then I'll certainly be out and about during Twin City Startup Week this week. So thank you again, everyone. Oh, and thank you, Ashley and Charlie and Suzanne. I really appreciate it. Awesome. Well, everyone, have a great rest of your day. Happy Monday.